darshanam na katam nrinam nitaram mriyamananam sangsirasya vaniyasaha anyata vyaktagatir darshanam na katham nrinam nityaram mriyamananam sangsirhasya vaniyasaha anyata vyaktagatir darshanam na katham nrinam nityaram mriyamananam sangsirasya vaniyasaha anyata vyaktagatir darshanam na katham nrinam nityaram mriyamananam sangsirhasya vaniyasaha
anyata
vyaktagatir
darshanam na katam nrinam nitaram mriyamananam sangsirhasya vaniyasaha
anyata vyaktagatir darshanam na katam nrinam nitaram mriyamananam sangsirasya vaniyasaha
anyata vyaktagatir darshanam na katham nrinam nitaram mriyamananam samsiddhasya vaniyasaha
anyata
darshanam na katam nrinam nitaram mriyamananam sangsirhasya vaniyasaha anyata darshanam na katam nrinam nitaram mriyamanam sangsirhasya vaniyasaha anyata vyaktagatir darshanam na katham nrinam nitaram mriyamananam sangsirasya vaniyasaha
anyata vyaktagatir darshanam na katam nrinam
nitaram mriyamananam
sangsirasya vaniyasaha
anyata vyaktagatir darshanam na katam nrinam nitaram mriyamananam sangsirhasya vaniyasaha
Anyatit Vyaktagatir
Anyatate Kviktagatir
Darshanam Nakatam Nirnam
Darshanam Nakatam Nrinam
Nitram Riyamananam
Nitaram Riyamananam
Samsidhasya Vaniyashaha
Sangsirasya Vanisaha. Word for word, Anyata, otherwise, Te, your, Avyaktagate, of one whose movements are invisible. Darshanam, meeting. Naha, for us. Katham, how. Nrinam, of the people. Nittaram, specifically. Mriyamananam, of those who are about to die. Sangsiddhasya, of one who is all perfect. Vaniyasaha, voluntary appearance. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Otherwise, without being inspired by Lord Krishna, how is it that you have voluntarily appeared here, though you are moving incognito to the common man and are not visible to us who are on the verge of death? Purport. The great sage Shukadev Goswami was certainly inspired by Lord Krishna to appear voluntarily before Maharaj Parikshit, the great devotee of the Lord, just to give him the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. One can achieve the nucleus of the devotional service of the Lord by the mercy of the spiritual master and the personality of Godhead. The spiritual master is the manifested representative of the Lord to help one achieve ultimate success. One who is not authorized by the Lord cannot become a spiritual master. Srila Shukadev Goswami is an authorized spiritual master, and thus he was inspired by the Lord to appear before Maharaj Parikshit and instruct him in the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. One can achieve the ultimate success of going back to Godhead if he is favored by the Lord's sending his true representative. As soon as a true representative of the Lord is met by a devotee of the Lord, the devotee is assured a guarantee for going back to Godhead just after leaving the present body. This, however, depends on the sincerity of the devotee himself. The Lord is seated in the heart of all living beings, and thus he knows very well the movements of all individual persons. As soon as the Lord finds that a particular soul is very eager to go back to Godhead, the Lord at once sends his bona fide representative. The sincere devotee is thus assured by the Lord of going back to Godhead. The conclusion is that to get the assistance and help of a bona fide spiritual master means to receive the direct help of the Lord himself. Om Jnanatimrandasya Ganajana Shalakaya Chakshurummalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I'm going to read the next text as well in purport. You are the spiritual master of great saints and devotees. I am therefore begging you to show the way of perfection for all persons, and especially for one who is about to die. Purport. Unless one is perfectly anxious to inquire about the way of perfection, there is no necessity of approaching a spiritual master. A spiritual master is not a kind of decoration for a householder. Generally, a fashionable materialist engages a so-called spiritual master without the so-called disciple, and thereby both the master and his ward go to hell without a doubt. Maharaj Parikshit is the right title to the interest of all men, particularly for the dying men. The question put forward by Maharaj Parikshit is the basic principle of the complete thesis of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now let us see how intelligently the great master replies. Yes. So this question Maharaj Parikshit put forward is, Prabhupada says, the basic principle of the complete thesis of Srimad Bhagavatam. What does one do at the time of death? Of course, not just at the time, because that also implies what does one do throughout their life? Because time of death is one moment, but the answer is we have to serve Krishna. We have to think of Krishna at the time of death. But to do that, one has to practice their whole life, Krishna consciousness. Of course, by the mercy of the Lord, anything is possible. So even when one takes Krishna consciousness in their later age, they may also think of Krishna at the time of death. But generally, it is a practice that we have to do. We have to absorb our mind in Krishna consciousness, and ideally, when we're as young as possible, to absorb our mind in Krishna consciousness, so that we are Krishna conscious in those last moments. And that here Swami has that book, Final Exam. Death is the final exam, the greatest exam of your life. So the verse is speaking about the spiritual master. At least this is a theme that Prabhupada highlights on in this, because Shukadeva Goswami just kind of appears out of nowhere, you could think, as I was mentioning last time I spoke, actually. But he just appears more or less, not randomly, but just very, very on time, perfectly on time. And now Prabhupada's explaining that he is certainly inspired by Krishna to voluntarily appear, because he could choose not to. But Krishna directs the spiritual master to to give mercy to the disciple, to the student. And so there's that verse, Brahmanande Brahmate Konya Bhagavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasadapaya Bhakti Lata Bija. The living entity is wandering throughout the universes, the Brahmanda. And if the living entity is fortunate, then by the grace of Guru and Krishna, by the grace of Krishna, Krishna sends a spiritual master to instruct such a person. So that fortune is, it's inconceivable in one sense, because what gives one fortune? Prabhupada says in this here that one has to desire, desire Krishna, desire to serve Krishna, desire to be pure, and that's in the next verse. He said at some point about sincerity. So when Krishna sees a sincere soul, the sincere devotee is thus assured of going back to God. So if one is sincerely approaching the Lord, then he will send a spiritual master. There's a saying that if you take one step to Krishna, he'll take 10 steps to you. Right? So we hear some testimonials of people, like in other faiths too, or devotees, how they call out to God and then right away he sends some representative, or he sends some message, or they have some sort of experience where they realize, Krishna is like right there, or God is right there. So there's a lot of testimonials about that. So Shukadeva Goswami arrives on the scene, and as the spiritual master, and Maharaj Parikshit as the student, even though they're actually both great devotees. And it's a nice point that one can achieve the nucleus of devotional service of the Lord by the mercy of the spiritual master and the personality of Godhead. So there's that verse as well about the Bhakti Lata Bija. that by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, the disciple, the sincere student, gets the bhakti creeper, the bhakti creeper, and the Guru imparts the disciple with the bhakti creeper and gives the process to water the creeper so that it can grow, hearing and chanting about Krishna, so that it can grow all the way up to the spiritual world and to the lotus feet of Krishna, So such is the mercy of the spiritual master. One who is not authorized by the Lord cannot become a spiritual master. Prabhupada says here, Shukadeva Goswami is authorized, and thus he's inspired by the Lord. So we can see that in our life when we met a spiritual master or guru, we have few different types of gurus, like Bhartma Pradakshina Guru, who shows the path of devotional service. We have Diksha Guru, we take initiation from Shiksha Guru, our instructing spiritual masters. So I know that the one thing that really solidified me to become serious in devotional service was after reading a little bit of the Nectar of Devotion by Srila Prabhupada. And then I felt like that path was really, the path of back to God, it was like really tangible. And so this is the mercy of the sadhus and the gurus, is that they give you that way, that path. They light the way to go back to Godhead. And then you get, by following their instructions, you get this direct perception of your real identity as a spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna and servant of Krishna.
And it's guaranteed. Prabhupada says that going back to Godhead is guaranteed by the spiritual master. He's acting it is. And it's, Prabhupada said many times that if one follows the principles and continues throughout his life in that way, then he's guaranteed to go back to home, back to Godhead. The guarantee is made on behalf of Krishna, and Krishna supports it. So the sincerity is, one is sincere if he follows the instructions of the spiritual master. If he doesn't, then he's not sincere. He may have some interest in becoming Krishna conscious, and that's nice. But it may take some time. But if he follows these principles and doesn't fall down, then he's assured of going back to home, back to Godhead.
Jai, thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Magadari Prabhu?
I'm wondering, it seems that offenses play some part in our not being able to follow the order of the spiritual master. So I'm wondering, we can feel that sometimes, like a mentality or a different attitude, and then it becomes difficult to follow the order of the spiritual master. Why do we make offenses? we know we don't want to, but why is it that happens?
Why do we make offenses, even though we may not want to?
Yes.
Well, we're very conditioned because, like, let's say, for example, we have the offense to the holy name of not disobeying the orders of spiritual master, and there's also not to see him as an ordinary person. So because we have mundane vision, we're conditioned by that, then we may perceive the spiritual master as an ordinary person, and thus make an offense. So that's a lot of that is due to conditioning. If we're sincerely trying to not offend the Lord's devotee, but so then we have to understand or reinforce our understanding of who the spiritual master is, and like that also with all the offenses, we have to hear the right understanding and try to apply that understanding. And then we could try to avoid offenses, but because we're conditioned very much so, then we may make offenses, but over time, then we become purified, and then we are able to more easily avoid those offenses.
That's a good answer. This transcendental knowledge, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, there's nothing so sublime and pure in the world as transcendental knowledge. So hearing this transcendental knowledge is incumbent, it's absolutely necessary. And we need to hear regularly. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. In order to be fixed in devotional service, we have to go on hearing. And the basic hearing is the Bhagavatam class and the Bhagavad Gita class that Prabhupada instituted. And he expected every devotee to attend. By attending these, there's a good chance we'll understand something about the importance of spiritual life. Otherwise, if we don't come, we don't take advantage of it, then what can we do? Then where are we going to get the transcendental knowledge? And hearing in the association, Satam Prasanga, oh, there you go. By hearing in the association of devotees, it's more powerful. That's why it's so important to do that. And Prabhupada especially showed the example of attending himself. Even when he wasn't able to give himself, when he wasn't well, he would go and listen to the class. So we have a great opportunity, and that inspiration from hearing in the class can continue. There's so many books. Prabhupada gave us all these books. And you may think, oh, I'm not a scholar, and I don't like to read, or whatever the excuse may be. But then you can hear them on a recording. For someone who doesn't have access to all the reading material, you can get a recording. They have devotees speaking. So nice. You can just hear. That's the thing, we have to hear repeatedly, again and again, because, as mentioned, our hearts are hard-hearted, and we're so filled up with garbage from this life and previous lives, so many things. We really have to take shelter of this transcendental knowledge. And then, along with the chanting, it goes perfectly together. Chanting every day, And following these principles, it's really quite easy in one sense. Lord Chaitanya has made a very easy process for us. Therefore, Rupa Goswami said, Namo Mahabharanaya, Krishna Prema Pradayate, Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaurati Shenma. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the most munificent incarnation because he's giving love of God so easily. Krishna demanded, first you all surrender. First you surrender, then I'll deliver you. But Lord Chaitanya doesn't even say you have to surrender. He's giving you love of Godhead just take it. You don't have to do anything extraordinary for it. It's like if someone comes and gives you $1 million, you didn't have to work for it. It just came to you. So consider yourself fortunate. So we're so fortunate, but sometimes we become unfortunate because we forget how rare it is, how hard it is, how valuable it is to get out of this material world.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Materna.
Hare Krishna. So when somebody takes this process, somewhat seriously, they start to endeavor to be engaged in hearing, all the time, or doing some Krishna conscious activity directly without wasting, any time in this matter, because he knows that death is sure to come and it can arise at any moment. So for one who, is endeavoring in this way and he's trying to become serious about going back to Godhead. Is it that the spiritual master actually gives him the information now that he needs as if death is to come in the next moment? Or is this something that, is not being given right away? It's the Prabhupada says we should think about this Krishna consciousness as if we could go at any moment. So is it that there's something, is everything being given right now?
You mean knowledge? All the knowledge, is it being given right now?
Yeah. Yeah, once somebody accepts a spiritual master, is this being given as if we were going to die very soon, or is it this as an expected thing that we're going to live a long time? So I'll give it to you a little bit by a little bit.
I'm not really understanding what you mean by give what? Purity or realization or knowledge? Or?
He's giving everything immediately. He says, surrender to Krishna. And that means all the time. He says, engage in devotional service, accept these principles, follow them, then you're protected. It's as soon as you sign up with a reputable insurance company, you're covered. From that moment on, whatever comes up, they take care of it. So yes, that's the point of initiation is so important, because it's at that point that one is committed. He's committed on his side, and the spiritual master commits on Krishna's behalf. And so therefore, all the doors are open. What is that verse? That verse about the Mahatma. All the gates, all the path.
Door to liberation?
That one who serves the Mahatmas, the path to the spiritual world was wide open. Tvodvaram yoshitam sangitam. And if one is more interested in sense gratification, associates with materialistic persons, then the door, the gate to hellish ignorance is wide open. So we have to take the opportunity. That's why sometimes people think that they'll wait until they get older. But we don't know how old we are, as pointed out. We may be tested at any time. And we should be prepared for the test by chanting and taking prasadam, associating with devotees, means we're preparing ourselves. Exactly. Staying with devotees. Prabhupada gave this opportunity by opening the temples and inviting people to come in and not only visit but stay. It's remarkable. That's such a great opportunity that everyone has. And so they should take that, consider themselves most fortunate. Yeah, that Brahmande Brahmite Kono Bhagavan Jeev. Bhagavan Jeev means very fortunate. Guru Krishna Prasade Bhai Bhak. He gets the mercy of Krishna to get the spiritual master, and then by the mercy of the spiritual master, he gets Krishna. So he's most fortunate. And one who doesn't take this opportunity is unfortunate.
Jai. Any other points? Yes, Magadari.
How can a lot of times we're making very strong efforts and we become discouraged. So how do we factor in this part?
Sometimes we make great efforts, but we're feeling discouraged about we feel like we're not making enough progress, or what?
Yeah, discouragement, I guess, comes in a lot of different forms. But we're feeling defeated, or we hear all this and we're thinking, well, it's just too much, my chest is burning with lust and I hate people, I hate all these people. Some crazy stuff we may think, I don't know.
Yeah. That can be very intense experience, can be a very intense experience. But that's what the process is about, is to purify these unwanted things in the heart. So when they arise, then one has to be tolerant and detached and can just continue on performing devotional service in the association of devotees, because that's the way to purify it. And it's going to be there if you don't purify it. So at some point you have to purify it. And it's either now, or you can try to avoid it and then give in to material desires and get kicked around more by the material energy. Or you can move forward in devotional service to purify it. Either way, it's not going to be very easy. But that's our predicament in the material world, because we've got so much material we've accumulated so much material contamination by coming in contact with the modes of nature and trying to enjoy the material world. So then we have these problems. But the solution is to follow the process of devotional service, which means in following instruction of a spiritual master, which is following the principles of Bhakti Yoga, and perform service. And then gradually we purify these things. So even if one is feeling like there comes up some obstacles on the path and one falls from the standard, if one just goes on continuing to try to adjust, try to improve, then one makes progress, is continuing to make progress versus just stopping and halting your progress and then finishing up later at some other point. So continuing on, there's enthusiasm, patience, confidence, etc. that one has to imbibe, and one has to try to display or try to cultivate those principles, and then one can make progress. So certain things help when one is feeling discouraged, and what I've noticed is the best remedy for that is to reveal one's mind to another devotee, especially a senior devotee or the spiritual master. And then by revealing and then inquiring, one can get knowledge, and a path can be shown how to overcome such obstacles. And then if we apply that, if we follow that advice, then we can overcome it. And simply by revealing too, it helps a lot. It helps get the weight off your shoulders, like you have in your mind maybe feeling like some very, very big issue, and when it's just in the mind, then it can really torment you. But once you can reveal it to a devotee or write it or something, then it helps release some of the pressure. And then one can see it a little more clearly, what the issue is and what the solutions are. So those are some thoughts about that. Did you have something, Radhastali? We'll take one last comment or question.
Hare Krishna. I have a question. So can you speak on, this is a very big topic, I think, but can you speak on like humility and low self-esteem and overcoming pride? So, because sometimes, we want to serve the spiritual master or devotees, but in some ways our minds get in the way thinking, well, I'm not good enough, I'm not the one to do that, but I want to do that. Like I want to offer that service, or, like overstepping that and thinking, well, I'm good enough to do this service. So is that healthy confidence, or is that pride? Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So just hearing, about surrendering to the spiritual master and taking their instruction. Sometimes we might think, well, I'm so low, or, I'm not good enough to do that, but I want to. So, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I used to have really low self-esteem before I joined Krishna consciousness. But somehow or other, it just kind of all went away, or a large chunk of that issue just kind of disappeared with the practice of Krishna consciousness. And it almost happened very abruptly. But yeah, so we might be feeling unworthy or unqualified, or lack of confidence. But there's very nice verse, especially in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it explains that with the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, even a lay person can move mountains, or a blind person can see. So the point is that by the mercy of Guru, Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, the Vaishnavas, one can perform miraculous feats. So it's not on our own strength that we're doing something, but it's simply by the mercy of the devotees and Krishna that we can actually do something. So when one is feeling like incompetent, we can have confidence that Krishna will help us. That's one of the principles of pure devotional service, execution of it. Confidence that Krishna will surely help us advance in devotional service and also help us perform our service. So that confidence is not pride, but it's dependence on Krishna. Pride is dependent on our own prestige or our own way, on our own making something happen. So actually, in those moments where you feel the lowest or most unqualified, you can see that you're feeling, then you turn to Krishna. That's when Krishna can actually very much work through you. And we see this in the prayers of Srila Prabhupada when his prayers on the Jaladuta, how unqualified he was explaining himself to be. Only by your mercy can this message be spoken nicely and appreciated. So he was displaying this mood, and then we see what he actually did. So that is a symptom of a devotee, is that they feel unworthy, unqualified. But the material side of that is not doing something, like, feeling like, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm unworthy of this, so therefore I'm not going to do it. But that's false humility, and it's in the mode of ignorance or a passion, because you feel like it's something, you're renouncing your duty by thinking it's too difficult. So those are some thoughts. So the whole thing is depending on Krishna, and we do that every morning in our japa period as well. We're chanting, we're trying to focus our mind on Krishna, praying to please engage me in your service, and we're developing this mood of dependence on Krishna. I just wanted to make one comment about something that's been going on outside of this window over here. Actually, this window particularly, but somebody's throwing, or more than one person, throwing flowers or stems outside of that window. And sometimes it happens over here too. So I would request you not to do that, because somebody eventually has to go pick those things up, because it leaves a mess, and then it's like sometimes the maha flowers are thrown out the door, but it doesn't like disintegrate into the grass. It just stays there. So eventually somebody has to pick it up. So it can be avoided by just not doing it. And there's a trash in the pujaari room you can use to throw away those things. Thank you. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.